Hi everyone, I'm Anurag, your host in your podcast, Women of Community Banking. Today it's a very special episode that we're airing with Becky Smith, the Chief Revenue Officer for CQ Credit Union, along with Pam Haller, Chief Marketing and Experience Officer for Royal Credit Union. So me and Pam, we've been chatting for some time on planning for co-hosting an episode, and finally we got a chance to do it. So thank you, Pam and Becky, for making a time to do this for us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So for my audience, I'll do a quick introduction about both these leaders. Becky is the Chief Revenue Officer for CQ Credit Union. She has close to 2 decades of experience, very similar background as of mine, starting with consulting in Fortune 500 firms across sales and marketing. Now, after spending a long stint of consulting experience like everyone, she exited consulting, went to industry. She joined a community bank as a CMO, followed by now she is a CRO at SECU. Her previous role at SECU Credit Union was she was leading marketing and strategy. So that's a quick round of introduction for Becky. I did a quick one for Pam. I love doing her introduction. You've been speaking for some time. So Pam is the CMO and Chief Experience Officer of Royal Credit Union. She leads everything marketing to retail ops to contact center. Also, I mean, her favorite pastime is dousing fires at Royal Credit Union, firefighting, and getting things at the place. And Pam's background is also very unique. She comes with a lot of experience across higher education and hospitality, right? So none of these two guests, co-host and guest, I would say, come from a typical credit union experience. They've moved into the ecosystem, made a place for themselves, and now actually run credit union. So it's a new perspective for my audience to listen to and tune into and understand rather, right? You can make it even if you come from a different ecosystem. So yeah, this is a quick round of introduction that I thought of doing for both of you. I'm sure I might have missed a couple of pointers. Why don't you go ahead?
Excellent. So, do you want me to fill in the blanks a little bit on some of the background? Great.
Sure.
So, you did a great job summarizing. I did spend the first 12 years of my career in a global consulting firm, working with a lot of different industries on sales and marketing initiatives across the world, frankly. So, lots of travel. And then from there, did get into the industry side, joined a community bank outside of DC, around 10 billion in assets as their chief marketing officer. So I got my first taste of working in a bank and for a bank, and then made my way over to the credit union industry about 5 years ago at CQ. And CQ is about 5 billion in assets, over 250,000 members, and we cover the state of Maryland. So excited to be on the podcast and talking about women in leadership.
Sounds good. Pam, what?
I think from my perspective, Anurag, you hit the highlights of Pam Haller, right? Came from outside the industry 6 years ago. Super excited to be here. And truthfully, my background, as you explained, came out of higher education and hospitality. I think what I'm excited about today is having the conversation with Becky. I mean, as two people who came from outside organizations, it's fun to kind of see the trajectory of our careers and to be able to get into some of the conversations of how did we get here today and kind of what does that future of the credit union community bank space look like?
That sounds perfect. So I have one burning question for Becky, right, which I love asking everyone. So what keeps you going, Becky?
Caffeine is the first thing, but in all seriousness, I am such a people person. I would say it's the people that I work with and for and around that keeps me going. I'm someone that I want to wake up being excited about the challenges that are in front of me in my job, but more importantly, I want to be excited about the people that are going to help solve those challenges with me. So that's really what keeps me going is people.
Sounds
That's
good.
awesome. That's wonderful. I think, Becky, as we talk about kind of what keeps you going and the leadership roles that you've kind of just defined, talk to us a little bit about, like, in today's world right now, what are the challenges you're facing, right? Let's start with challenges and opportunities. I think, they kind of sometimes go hand in hand.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, some of the challenges, at least that I've faced, I certainly have had a lot of great fortune in my career to have moved up fairly quickly. So I have sort of been in a position where I've been the younger person in the leadership team all my life now that I'm in my mid 40s. It's all catching up. And now I'm not quite the youngest person, but for this whole time, kind of up until now, I have been a little bit on the younger side. So I would say that from a challenge perspective, imposter syndrome is certainly a very real thing for me, definitely. Feeling as though I don't necessarily belong where I am. That's a challenge that I've had to get over in my career. And as I talk to some of the female leaders in our CQ four walls, they have a very similar kind of perspective. I think it's a very shared fear of that imposter syndrome. And, I think we've got to, as women, give ourselves a little bit more grace and not live in the fear and self-doubt, but, be our own best advocates. And it takes a little bit of time to get there. So it's easier said than done for sure. But I think that is one of the challenges that I hear the most from females is how do you do it all? And, how do you get to the places that you are and have the confidence that you do? And it just comes with time.
Right. And time for some people isn't, obviously something we're all really great at, right? As we all try to navigate this, right? Patience with time and patience with opportunities, I think sometimes, takes a little bit for you to step back. So, when you think about your career, give us an example of a lesson learned where patience and time, based on that advice works out for you.
Yeah, I'll tell you just at a macro level, I never thought I would be working in the financial industry. I was somebody that was not the best person in math. Math was not my strong suit. To this day, my parents are blown away when they tell others what my career is, because it was always one of those careers I think they would say would be the last on their list for me to choose. And I say that because not having a very formed opinion on what I wanted to do early on allowed me to navigate to this position and career and not rule it out, So giving myself the patience and time to get some exposure to other industries, understand what's out there. Some of the industries I thought I'd be most excited about turns out aren't for me. So giving myself a little bit of time to experience other things, other ways of managing, other types of businesses, allowed me to open myself to opportunities that I might not otherwise have. If you were to ask me 25 years ago where I thought I'd be today, this is not where it is. But I'm very happy and glad I ended up here. And I think my career has kind of put me right on this path to this position, but that's because I was open to it, open to the, bouncing around and navigating through my career trajectory.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep.
I think I'm going to ask you one of the favorite questions that Anurag loves to ask people, and he's going to look at me and be like, why didn't you ask it? Talk to us about your mentors, right? Obviously, female leaders sometimes, find themselves either mentoring or being mentored. Who are your mentors?
Oh my gosh. So many. I have taken the approach of, I wouldn't say I have a formalized mentor that I go to bounce ideas off of, but I have had so many inspiring women throughout my career that I have just watched and taken note of how they carry themselves, things I want to do when I become a leader. I was taking note of that and learning and listening to what others, the advice that was given to me. I can recall so many different times in my career where a female executive that really I was inspired to be like had given me advice that has stuck with me. And I can give you one anecdote right now that just popped in my head, but I recall a time at my previous bank institution, one of our board directors was a female, and she was someone working in a male-dominated field in commercial real estate and really had progressed to a very senior level. So I was very inspired by her path. And I can remember being at a board meeting, and I was hearing the conversation go on, and I knew that they weren't thinking of something, and I was a little intimidated because I was fairly new to jump in. And I finally said, I'm sorry, I just have to ask the question, have you thought about X, Y, and Z? And after the meeting, this board director pulled me aside and she's like, don't you ever apologize for asking a question. She said, you don't hear any men apologize before they ask a question, so don't do it yourself. And that's one of those things that have stuck with me so long. And I find myself telling other women that same piece of advice as well. So mentorship, I think, can come in all sorts of different forms. And for me, it's been a lot around observing and really just watching those that have inspired me and see what their path is and how they handle situations. And on the flip side, I am asked to be a mentor quite often, and I love it. It's one of the things that I'm most proud of, is to be able to kind of reach back and help the next generation of women succeed. But it's very much a give and take. I learn as much from them as they learn, I'm sure, from me. So I think mentors play a really big role, and it can be unconventional at times as well.
Yeah, agree.
That's interesting. And mentors are always much needed. For me, whatever I do today, interestingly, or at least I would say 70% of my mentors are women. In my first consulting stint of Accenture, I didn't even know how to do a VLOOKUP on Excel sheet to start with, right? 10 years back. Literally, I
Me too.
as simple as that. Leave aside formatting decks, right? So there was a very kind woman, Shinjini. She literally did hold my hand and taught me all the nine yards. So immensely grateful towards mentors, and it's very important to have a mentor. And even now, right, whatever I do, it's very driven by mentors. Unless you have a mentor, it's really difficult. Absolutely.
I completely agree. And I will say, too, the one thing I'll add is my mentors haven't always exclusively been female either. I think I've got a lot of great mentors that have been males that have really shown me certain things in my career as well. And I learn a lot from everybody that I'm around, even including my boss today too. Just watching how he navigates things, certainly really helpful and impactful. But I'm with you. I didn't know how to do a VLOOKUP either, but you learn quickly in consulting, don't you? You're drinking from a fire hose. There is no shallow end. You just have to figure it out.
Absolutely. I was turned on to become a healthcare SME within a month.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
That's typical consulting. So yeah, this is very important. That sounds good. So Pam, do you want to ask a few more questions? And
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit. People always like to use leadership styles, leadership philosophies. You can put a name in anything, but Becky, from your perspective, talk to us a little bit about how you lead, right? What's important to you from a leadership perspective, and kind of the approach you take.
Absolutely. I am someone that, and I don't know really if there's a phrase or a word for it, but somebody that is really big on building connections with my team. And personal connections with them, because I think for me it's important to know them outside of an employee, what matters to them when they're not at work, what keeps them up at night, what's most important to them. And I think if you can connect at that level, you earn a little bit of trust and respect, and you gain some rapport, and you show that you care about the person and not just the employee. That's a really big part of my leadership style, is trying to make sure I build some connections on a personal level so that I understand what's important to them outside of work. So that's one of the areas. And I think the other piece is I'm very collaborative thinker. So I like to iterate. I like to brainstorm. I'm not at all a command and control type of person or leader. So I don't think that I have the monopoly on all the good ideas. I know that I don't. So bringing more voices into the room I'm one to think that, more voices can bring better ideas. So
Yeah.
even if I've got an idea and I think it's a good one, I will often pressure test it with, my direct reports and my team. And sometimes they think it's great and sometimes they don't. And we've built enough of a relationship that they're not scared or intimidated to give that feedback to me. So that's been my style. And I know that doesn't work for everyone. I know many people like to keep sort of things separate from a personal life and a work life, but in my opinion, there's just so much overlap these days. And, I think all of us that worked through the pandemic and we're all struggling just to get by had to really quickly build some bonds that you probably didn't know you needed before in a very different manner. All over you were seeing people's kids come in frame, and you were seeing computer issues and things like that. So just getting to know people a little bit better, I think, goes a long way.
Yeah. And you talk a lot about open, safe spaces, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, as we all try to grow and develop and do our work, being able to openly express your opinion, right? Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm not right, but at least we're collaborating through it, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's got an opinion, everybody's got a direction. I think what you've described is a very open environment that says, hey, we're still going to go down this road, but everybody in this room, we're going to talk about it, right? We're going to talk
Yep.
about how to get there, right?
That's right.
Which kind of takes us to this fun place of, I always like to say, maybe it's just as I get older in my career as well, right? The tips and tricks, but what are those pieces of advice? And I always like to find out, Becky, if there was one thing that you thought to yourself, boy, I really wish, Becky at year 2 of her career would have known this. What would that piece of advice be that you'd give yourself of like, hey, if only I would have known this X number of years ago?
Yeah, I think there's probably a couple of things. I think one of the things that I learned through those consulting years for sure, and even as I've progressed into industry side, is there is certainly an assumption sometimes that others might know more about what's going on than you do. So that's not always the case. And I say that because I think you've got to give yourself enough credit to be able to weigh in and opine on things, even if you don't feel like the smartest person in the room on that subject matter, because you just might be. And so don't make assumptions about other people's knowledge or experience based on their tenure, et cetera. I would have a little bit more confidence in, knowing what I know and being able to articulate that in a room of maybe people that are, from this industry their whole life, that have 30 years of experience in banking. They may be coming at it from a very different perspective than maybe my opinions are. So I would give myself a little bit of confidence. And then I alluded to it earlier, but I think fear and self-doubt is something that is a little bit more unique, at least from my perspective, to females as they come up in their career. And we have a tendency to want to be all things to everybody. Be the best mom, be the best daughter, be the best spouse, be the best friend, and be the best at your job. And that is a lot of pressure to put on anybody because there's no way to be the best at everything at the same time. So being able to give yourself a little bit of grace and a little bit of credit for the things that you do, it's tough, and it's, again, I have not perfected it by any means, but certainly as you get older, you do start to take count for the things that are most important in life, and giving yourself a little bit of the benefit of the doubt of you're doing your best, and that's good enough. That's a really big thing, and that's a hard thing to. Even if I told myself that at that age, I'm not sure I would believe myself. I think I would still be trying to be the best at absolutely all of those different categories. And it's something I think you just have to learn. But women are great at juggling. Men are too. I'm not counting them out, but we do. I don't see many men around my boardroom table texting around pickup schedules underneath the table like I am, but we can do a lot of juggling
Right.
as women, and I think just giving ourselves and each other pep talks when needed is really important.
Yeah. That's
Uh,
awesome. I think you're right. It would be fun to have everyone raise their hand during a board meeting that said who just coordinated the latest pickup or drop off, right? Of
Exactly.
the multiple pickups and drop offs that are going to happen in this next 2 hour period while we all sit in this boardroom. I want you to
That's
know
right.
I'm managing it. So I giggle as you have the phone underneath because I have a feeling there's lots of phones underneath the table. Like,
I
okay, what's going on?
I'll tell you the one other time that makes me think of is one of the years ago we were talking in one of my previous jobs about women's maternity leave and what the policy is and what we should be offering. And I remember being in a room full of men and they were all weighing in on, well, should we make it longer? Should we not? Da, 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 da. And I remember really being very ballsy at that point and raised my hand. I was like, raise your hand if you've had a baby in this room. And nobody did. And I was like, here's what I would say. Just hear me out. And thank goodness I have built such great relationships with my peers that they just laughed about it. So it wouldn't work for in all situations. But there are times I think as women, we do have to voice, kind of break through and say, just remember, think about it from our perspective a little bit because we have some firsthand experience in some of these things.
Right.
Absolutely, Becky.
All right. Well, you have had an amazing career. Oh, Anurag, I was going to turn it over to you. You have had an amazing career and done some amazing things. And I think kind of the next subject we want to talk about is a little bit about, kind of the credit union industry and where we're headed. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, to Anurag, to ask some of those kind of questions.
Yeah, maybe I'll ask you a couple of questions around that, right? So, firstly, Becky, we would want to understand your long career, both in consulting and industry right now in credit unions. Uh, can you please share a few very successful engagements? That's what we call in consulting engagements that you're really proud of throughout your career and you feel are worth mentioning.
Sure. You know what? I'll stick to the credit union space for a couple of things I'm really proud of. One is, again, sort of during the pandemic, we learned a lot. And one of the silver linings I think that we learned is companies and organizations were really changing the way that they approach things, and doing the right thing became the competitive advantage. Just kind of getting out of your own way and helping people became what set you apart. And so one of the things that we did at SECU during the pandemic that has grown exponentially since then is a campaign all around kindness. And we started in the month of October 4 years ago, just trying to encourage as many acts of kindness across the state of Maryland as we could. And our goal was 100,000 acts of kindness that first year. And we exceeded it. And you start to see this groundswell of people that were really excited about doing acts of kindness. So it's grown over the years, so much so that this past year we exceeded 500,000 acts of kindness in October. And Governor Moore in Maryland made a proclamation that October is CQ's Kindness Month because of all the acts that are happening across the month of October. And that's just such a good sign for me that there's a lot of good out there and people really want to tap into that. And so it makes me proud every year when I hear the stories of members and employees and the community, cutting their hair off for locks of love or ordering pizza for their local fire station. Like, these things are really contagious. So the kindness campaign is something I'm incredibly proud of. And, I give my boss a lot of credit. When I came to him with this idea, he was like, do it, go for it. There was no discussion. He was very supportive. So that's one. And I think the other thing is, and this will go and speak a little bit to, I think, where the industry's headed. We also launched a virtual financial center during the pandemic, and it has really exploded over the last 5 years. I mean, it's become our number one financial center for almost all of our lending and deposit products. We have a team now of about 10 people that work virtually and can help our members just like this through the screen from the comfort of their own home in extended hours when it works for them. They can chat with us. We have the ability to even co-browse, help teach them how to use online banking with their own computer. So a lot of really exciting things there. That's really where we feel like the future is headed, is sort of this hybrid assisted self-serve at the member or the customers, whatever time and place is best for them. So those are probably the two biggest things I'm proud of over the last several years.
That's interesting. Pam, do you want to cover something? Because I mean, there's a lot to talk about the second point. The first is amazing, but for second, it's so relevant to even what you do. I mean, if you want, you can just maybe cover a couple of pointers and then I'll move to the next question.
Yeah, I think the virtual contact center, the virtual center, as you talk about, I mean, what a great way to become a member's advocate, right? I mean, it's like we all know. You just described earlier, kind of like what is it like to arrange pickup, and you're doing all these things, and you're trying to compress it between the normal hours, and so. Isn't it wonderful to be like, okay, it's 6:30, and now I'm sitting at my kitchen table, and I really need someone to help me walk through the loan process, right? Absolutely. Or I have a question as I fill this out. So to know that you guys at your credit union have the ability to offer that, that's amazing, right? Because it's like, or the kids are now dropped off, and I have 45 minutes during swim lessons to apply for my loan online in my car, right? Because I'm sitting outside because it's hot and in air conditioning. I mean, that is an amazing service opportunity that you guys have brought forward, and I can only imagine it's going to take off.
Thank you. I think it's been really interesting to see the different use cases of how people are using it, and you named a few of them. We've definitely seen this. Busy moms doing it in the half-hour block that they have, or college students that get to bring their parent into the conversation that may be living in a different state. So now we're talking to the parent and the student with the member advisor, giving them some advice on our student credit card or how to pay off their student loans, those type of things. We've even had somebody take an appointment from a plane. And so they had their headphones on, they were able to talk without everybody, hearing the whole conversation, but it's pretty amazing. I think that's really the direction we ought to be going as an industry, is really meeting the members where they are and not thinking from an inside out perspective around banking, what works best for us, but really kind of outside in. What works for our members, what do they need, and then building a strategy that meets those needs. And I think that's a big shift in mindset, particularly for our industry, which has been historically very inside out. We've got these core systems and things that make it a little difficult to be flexible and agile, and I think that's kind of shifting on its head as well, and we've got to make sure that we're keeping up with it.
Yeah, agreed.
I'm glad to talk to two forward-thinking women leaders here, because I mean, at the time when I hear about that thing that courses are difficult, life is difficult, I'm like, oh yes, I should talk to you now. So that's interesting. Now, obviously, I'll ask you a very obvious question about where do you think is the credit union ecosystem moving? A lot of challenges, right? I mean, if I ask everyone what is the biggest challenge, what Pam talked about a few minutes back and starting, deposits is the biggest challenge. Liquidity is the biggest challenge. I mean, we don't know when rates will go down. Possibly in November, we don't know as of yet, but yes. So where do you think as a whole the industry is moving compared to the competition around? I mean, I take this example almost every single day. It takes 3.5 minutes to go to Chime to open a checking account, right? Vis-a-vis an experience with an average credit union is relatively much longer, right? And it's not that equal sexy experience, what I call going to a neo bank or a challenger bank or to a fintech, right? So with so many moving parts, competition or challenge on bigger banks, the bigger fishes, right? Since we are very member driven, very community driven, and we prioritize that as the highest priority, right? Considering everything, where do you think is the ecosystem moving? And what are your predictions for rest of 2024 and next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are facing a lot of challenges. You just laid out a few. We aren't keeping up necessarily from a technology standpoint. Our membership base is aging. That's across our industry. We aren't capturing our fair share of deposits or even, loans in some cases as well. So, for us, I think this industry needs to think less about how do we become everything to everybody, but more about how do we partner with others to provide our members with what they need. And so, if you think about the credit unions, one of the competitive advantages I believe we have is we do have that membership population, that membership base. We have 250,000 members. You don't see that in a community bank, at that scale. These are members that trust us, have had some sort of relationship with us. So, in order to remain relevant and significant in their lives, we've got to be able to provide them what they need from a banking perspective. If we can't build it in house, it's going to behoove us to partner with those that already have it. So I think we're going to see in our industry more strategic partnerships, more white labeling of different solutions.
Yep.
I think more. I think we're going to become as much of a connector as we are a financial institution, and that's okay. I mean, it's almost sort of that AARP model of that's the base, right? That is the core, but they connect you to so many different things that you might need, but your loyalty is with the core. And so I think we need to do that as an industry. And, if we can start to partner with some of these fintechs versus view them as competitors, I think that's going to really benefit us as a whole. And I think we're starting to see there's some credit unions out there that are doing this right now. And so I think we're going to see more of those partnerships moving forward. And frankly, we've got to, because it takes a lot of money to compete with those large banks. We just don't have the marketing budgets.
Absolutely. So
Pam, you might have the marketing budget, but we don't.
I don't think we do. I think you're the same point. And an interesting part about what you say is, at the end of the day, the part that the credit unions have is our membership base, right?
Exactly.
So you have this built-in trusted advisor relationships now, just to make sure you don't, kind of send them down the wrong path. So that's why strategic partnerships are going to have to be, your AARP model is great, right? You can use it any sort of membership-based organization. It's what goes hand in hand. And then the other piece I think is huge for us as, our front-facing team members, just like yours, right? Our front-facing employees, that's where that relationship is.
Oh my gosh.
So making sure that we have not only trained, but got them ready to deal with the things that are coming in. And as we will all say, pre and post COVID, and the economic conditions, the needs of the members have changed greatly. Right. And trying to help guide them with the right advice at the right time with the right products and services or the right relationships. Huge opportunities.
Exactly right. You're exactly right. And you couldn't be more on point with the front line. I mean, really, that's where the rubber meets the road when they get in front of a member advisor, and it's what impression did that leave and what experience did that leave you with? And they really are the experts in providing that best in class experience. So when we get in front of a member advisor, it's best case scenario, but we have to somehow figure out a way to replicate that same experience and give that same feeling of connectedness through the digital channels as well. So that's where I think we're going to have to see more investment happen across the industry too, is the digital channels, to make sure that it's a very omni-channel like experience. You're getting that same experience no matter where you interact with us.
Agreed.
Sounds good. But at the end of the day, again, finishing this, or rather wrapping up the podcast with one single thing, that all three of us are aligned towards serving members at the top. We are not banks. We are here to serve members. And that's a priority. Member experience is something which I strive for. And you being veterans in the industry, do the same thing. So in the interest of time, I want to just wrap up the discussion, extending my heartfelt thanks to both of you. Thanks, Pam, for co-hosting. It was amazing. And thanks, Becky, for joining us. Thanks a lot. Have a good one.
Thank you. Thanks, Pam.
Thank you.